McLaren's start to the 2024 Formula 1 season has been solid but unspectacular. And that's disappointing given hopes it might take the fight to Red Bull, having been its closest challenger at times late last year. It's far from being a bad start, scoring 28 points for an early third place in the Constructors' Championship, but the performance level of the McLaren-Mercedes MCL38 in the first two events of the season has proved long-standing weaknesses remain, alongside similar strengths to what made the car so quick at times in 2023. The Jeddah track made that emphatically clear given how quick the car was in the fast parts of the track. As team principal Andrea Stella pointed out, it was rapid in the high-speed first sector. Lando Norris set the quickest time of Sector 1 during the Grand Prix thanks to the fast corner strength of the car. But in the second and third sectors, where the slow left-handers of turns 10 and 27 are vital for lap time, the McLaren slipped down the order. Such long, slow corners have long been a problem for McLaren, stretching back to even before the current ground effect regulations were introduced. As Stella explains, the initial turn-in performance is good, meaning the car is competitive enough through, say, short, sharp 90-degree slow corners. But if the turns are significantly longer, the McLaren gives up a little bit. To add to that, the top speed of the McLaren still isn't good enough. In qualifying, it was slowest in the main speed trap located 200 metres before the last corner. It was 11.1 km per hour slower than Haas. Even if you disregard Haas, given it was so much faster than any other car, McLaren is giving away almost 6 km per hour to Red Bull. This is specifically about the efficiency of its DRS, given the car's top speed is better relative to the opposition when it isn't open. The McLaren also remains a tricky car to drive, just as it has been for many years. Lando Norris once described it as being on a knife edge on a quick lap, and despite the progress McLaren has made with its 2024 car, the characteristics still aren't to his liking. The good news is that McLaren does have upgrades in the pipeline that will tackle its weaknesses in the not too distant future. But the bad news is that Stella admits it's likely at least another one-year journey to complete this exercise of resolving these balance issues. And it's essential McLaren goes through this process. If it's to have a car consistently able to fight for wins, it needs to be an all-rounder. So it needs to improve in long, slow corners, gain more speed when the DRS is deployed, and give the drivers a car they can be more confident in. So what's McLaren's development plan? Well, there's nothing major planned for the upcoming run of races, with some minor upgrades for the next two events in Australia and Japan worth only a small amount of lap time. However, beyond that, there is a major upgrade planned within the first third of the season. So that would mean either the Miami Grand Prix in early May, which isn't ideal because it's a sprint event, or the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola in the middle of the month. It is hoped this upgrade will make inroads into the slow corner weaknesses in particular. Key to this will be a new front wing. The McLaren front wing concept is very similar in 2024 to the one they finished last season with, as Stella has admitted. So we can expect to see some significant changes at the front of the car. This will tackle a long-standing problem for McLaren, which is aerodynamic struggles when the car is in yaw and significant steering lock is applied. When asked to explain McLaren's slow corner struggles in Bahrain, Stella said it was all about how the car behaved in the more extreme yaw conditions. Yaw is the angle at which the car hits the airflow. If you think about a car going through a corner, it's doing so at an angle. In a fast corner, the yaw angle is far smaller than for a slow corner where the car has to rotate significantly more. The increased complexity of the aerodynamic flow field when the car is in yaw makes this more difficult to understand and optimise. And as Stella says, the airflow regime is completely different in fast corners compared to slow corners. So while the McLaren turns much better thanks to the front end in the short, slow corners, once in a longer turn that requires more rotation, once in the corner, the car hits problems because of the more extreme angles the front wing is hitting the air at. Getting this right is all about the fine details of the geometry of the front wing and how it interacts with the rest of the car, in particular the front wheel wake and the front of the underfloor. And it's made doubly complicated given the greater the steering lock, the more disruption from the increasing angle of the front wheels. The front wing upgrade coming around the time of Imola will be a step in the right direction, but even with McLaren's new wind tunnel fully operational, it will only ameliorate the situation. These changes will also make the car more predictable for the drivers, as the inconsistency of the aerodynamics with steering lock applied is a major contributor to the knife edge qualities. But while further developments can be expected after Imola, including more to tackle the top speed deficit that is all about making the DRS work better in conjunction with the rest of the car to augment the effect, it's going to take longer than that to eliminate the weaknesses completely. In the long term, it's all about what Stella characterises as at least a one-year journey. You might assume that's for similar reasons to those cited by Mercedes and Ferrari last year, both of which required some architectural changes to unlock more potential. While for McLaren there may be some minor details in these areas it needs to improve, fundamentally this is an aerodynamic challenge, and the reason it's going to take so long is the enormous complexity of it. If you consider the vast range of conditions the car must run in, that requires a huge amount of aerodynamic testing work to optimise it, and McLaren is limited by the aerodynamic testing restrictions. Last year it finished 4th in the Constructors' Championship, so has less CFD and, crucially, wind tunnel time than the majority of its competitors. So it's working on a complex challenge with restricted resources. That's why it will take time. And these are characteristics the established top teams were tackling far earlier than McLaren, meaning it's still playing catch-up from the technical troubles of the last decade or so. And this is particularly crucial for 2026. While McLaren can aspire to win races before then, realistically it's likely to be the major rule changes then that will present the opportunity for it to emerge as a title-winning force. That's why Stella says it's vital for McLaren to show it can understand and fix these problems. And if McLaren can successfully tackle these weaknesses while maintaining its strengths, then in the long term it really could have a world beater of a car. While McLaren is working on all of that back at the factory, the key to it having a successful season is making the most of what it has. And what it has should become a lot clearer over the next 2 races. While Bahrain in particular and parts of the Jeddah track exposed its weaknesses, Australia and Suzuka have recently been stronger circuits. Even during McLaren's poor start to 2023, Norris finished 6th in Melbourne. That was partly thanks to the track lacking the long duration slow corners that proved such a problem, although the late race chaos also played a part. But Suzuka is the key measure. Thanks to a quirk of the calendar, this year's Japanese Grand Prix is just 6 months after last year's. That makes it a far more meaningful measure than a comparison of the early season races. In both Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, McLaren made a big step in terms of pace from 2023 to 2024, the largest of all teams in Bahrain at just over 1.7 seconds and the second most behind RB in Saudi Arabia at almost 1.2 seconds quicker. But last year, these races were before McLaren got its act together. By contrast, by the time F1 got to Suzuka in 2023, McLaren was fast, particularly on such high-speed tracks. There, it was the main challenger to Red Bull, with Norris and Piastri finishing 2nd and 3rd. If McLaren is able to be the lead challenger to Red Bull at times this year, then it will be at a circuit like Suzuka. So in particular, its performance relative to Ferrari, second best at both tracks F1 has visited in 2024 so far, will be crucial to measure. McLaren is still making real progress, but with Red Bull taking a big step forward, just as Stella warned it might back in January, it's going to take more time before it can be expected to be at that level. In the meantime, McLaren has a car that is certainly good enough to be in contention for 3rd in the championship, even if Red Bull and maybe Ferrari will be out of reach. And with Stella setting a timeline of at least 1 year for producing a car that can be an all-rounder, at its best across a wide range of circuits, it's clear there's still some serious ground to be covered if McLaren is to achieve its objective of re-emerging as a title-winning force in F1.